In this video, we're going to walk through all of the arteries first of the body that we care about, certainly not an exhaustive list, then all of the veins, then we'll talk a little bit about coronary circulation, and finally fetal circulation. A lot of this stuff you've seen before in lab, almost all of it. So none of this should really be new. I just wanted you to put it all together in one place. All of the arteries that I'm going to present, arteries and veins and everything in this video are fair game for your exam next week. Okay, so we are going to start with arteries, and arteries are always moving away from the heart. So we're going to start with a little heart. And before we really get started, I would suggest that you grab a couple blank sheets of paper and draw these along with me. To help you kind of organize your studies after you draw them once, I've posted a document on Blackboard under handouts called Arteries and Veins, and it is a list of every single structure I'm going to walk you through. It also has practice diagrams where you can label arteries and veins and coronary vessels as well as fetal circulation pathways. So pull that up or print it out, or I guess not, as we walk through this. So first of all, we have got an artery that heads to the lungs, and so I'm going to draw that as blue. Even though it's an artery, it has got low oxygen blood in it because it is headed to the lungs to get oxygen. And that is our pulmonary trunk. And from that pulmonary trunk branches a left and right pulmonary artery. Arching up over the top of that is where we have our aorta. So I'm going to try to copy and paste this. Paste. That went well. And now I'm going to get rid of these labels. And here's our aorta. Coming up over the top. Our aorta has multiple different parts of it. We've got the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and then the descending aorta. And for the descending aorta, it's got more specific names depending on where we are. If we're in the thorax, so if we're superior to the diaphragm, this is the thoracic aorta, and if we're inferior to the diaphragm in the abdomen, it is the abdominal aorta. Moving on to the branches coming off of the aorta. So now our heart's going to get a little smaller. Getting crazy. Okay, let's just start that again. Heart, aorta, there we go. Alright, so we have got three main branches coming off of the arch of the aorta. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Perfect. We have got a brachiocephalic trunk or artery. We have got a subclavian, and we have got a common carotid. This brachiocephalic trunk will then branch to give us a common carotid on the right side, as well as a subclavian. That's not what I want. Undo. Alright, now we're going to look at the branches of the upper limb. So we've got a heart and an aorta. Okay, so here, I know this doesn't look great, but here's our left subclavian artery, and here's our right subclavian, and they're called subclavian because they're hanging out right into the clavicles. Once these arteries pass under cover of, or right by rib 1, then it's just going to change its name to the axillary artery. The axilla is the armpit, and so this is the artery that's running through the armpit. Same artery is going to continue. Once it passes by the border of teres major, this is now going to be the brachial artery. And once the brachial artery gets to about the cubital fossa region, it's going to branch into an ulnar artery and a radial artery. So those are all of the branches off of the subclavian that we really care about. While we're still on this page, we're just going to look and see what happens to our common carotids. They're going to be ascending in the neck, and eventually they're going to branch into an internal and external carotid artery. So from common, we get external. That one is going to have more branches in the neck, and it's going to go to places on the face and the scalp. The internal carotid artery, this is the artery that passes through the carotid canal that we studied on the skull in lab last fall. Internal carotid artery is just headed up to the brain and structures inside the head. Now we're going to move on to the abdominal aorta. So here's our diaphragm. Here's our abdominal aorta coming through. Okay, so first let's talk about the unpaired branches. Unpaired means there's only one of them. It doesn't have a buddy, it doesn't have a pair, and these generally come right off the anterior side of the aorta. So the first one just beneath the diaphragm is our celiac trunk. And the celiac trunk is going to provide blood to all regions of an anatomical area called the foregut. The foregut includes the stomach and the first part of the duodenum. It also includes the liver and the gallbladder and the spleen. So coming off of the celiac trunk, we've got a splenic artery, a left gastric artery, and a common hepatic artery. Just inferior to the celiac trunk is the superior mesenteric artery, that I like to abbreviate SMA. The superior mesenteric artery runs through the mesentery, and it's targeting a region of the digestive system called the midgut. The midgut includes the last, about half of the duodenum, the rest of the small intestine, so all of the jejunum and ileum, and then the large intestine until we get to about halfway through the transverse colon. So it starts at the duodenum and supplies blood all the way to about halfway through the transverse colon. Finally, a little bit further down here, we have got the inferior mesenteric artery that we like to abbreviate IMA. So those are our three unpaired arteries and the branches of the celiac trunk. Now let's look at the paired arteries that come off the abdominal aorta. And our diaphragm for reference. Alright, so we have got a left and right renal artery. And then coming right off of the aorta, usually just inferior to that, will be our left and right gonadal arteries. The only time it's appropriate to call it a gonadal artery is if you cannot at all determine the sex of the individual that artery belongs to. If you can at all figure out whether it is a male or a female, then the appropriate names are testicular or ovarian. Down here, the aorta will bifurcate This is where we have our iliac artery. So we start with a common iliac, and then we've got an external iliac and an internal iliac. Here I'm going to draw the inguinal ligament. The external iliac artery will pass underneath that inguinal ligament, and then it changes its name to become the femoral artery. So we've made it down to the leg. We just have a couple more arteries to go. The femoral artery stays the femoral artery as long as it's in the anterior thigh. We can pick it up, though, in that popliteal fossa, that little diamond-shaped region on the backside, on the posterior side of the knee. Here it comes. Now it's the popliteal artery. And so in order to move from anterior thigh to posterior thigh, the femoral artery passed through the adductor hiatus. It's that little gap in the tendon of adductor magnus, and as soon as you see it in the posterior thigh, that is when it becomes the popliteal fossa, or the popliteal artery, excuse me. That's going to continue down into the posterior compartment of the leg, and then it's going to branch into the anterior, which is going to go forward into the anterior compartment. So that's why I've drawn it in dotted lines here, because you can't see it anymore. Anterior tibial artery, and the posterior tibial artery will continue in that posterior compartment of the leg. Branching off the posterior tibial artery will be the fibular artery, and that will stay in the posterior compartment. It just runs a little bit more on the lateral side. Those are all of the arteries besides the coronary arteries that you need to know. In the next video, we'll look at all of the veins that you need to know.